Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Confederate Monster by Dave Swartz. So this is issue 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, this is the perks for the IndieGoGo campaign that Dave Swartz ran. I forget what the length of the campaign was, but I thought it was a pretty reasonable timeline. I think he started the campaign and completed it within or around a year. I can't remember with a lot of these IndieGoGo campaigns, but this is a crowdfunded comic, and Dave Swartz, I believe he did an Alterna comic a while back, which I'm pretty sure was probably an indie comic before it became an Alterna comic. And I forget the name of his comic in Alterna. I think I remember vaguely reading issue 1, and it was like an interesting little sort of alt-reality type of comic where he had like Nikola Tesla and I think Einstein visiting aliens and shit. And Confederate Monster is kind of in the same vein. It's sort of a historical type of genre, right? Or history type of genre, I guess you could say. And I guess that's kind of Dave Schwartz's wheelhouse. That's what he likes most. So it makes sense to write and draw what you do, and again, people can correct me in the comments. I'm fairly certain he both wrote and drew all of this and probably lettered it, because it doesn't have any credits other than Dave Swartz. So, and I do remember this art style from that Nikola Tesla Einstein comic from a while ago. I'm trying to remember what the name of that comic was. I think I swear I read the first issue, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. So this book was interesting. I kind of wanted to give it a try. Just because it did come with like 3 issues, so it felt kind of like more of a complete package compared to other IndieGoGo campaigns. That being said, I do have some criticisms with the complete package comment I just said here for this book. But the basis for Confederate Monster is it's basically following the tales of a reconstructive surgery doctor named Daniel Schmidt in the Confederacy, in Virginia in particular, in the year of 1864, which is pretty much the end of the Civil War. 1864, 1865 is pretty much the Civil War is kind of running down, and the Southerners are losing. For those of you who are not into American history, Civil War was a pretty big deal here in the United States in our history. Fought between the North and the South, with the North fighting to preserve the Union, and also, later on freeing the slaves, and the South to preserve their states' rights, and also the institution of slavery with which their economy relied on, right? Very, very devastating war. A lot of people died. I think it's still the highest casualty war in American history. But enough of the history lesson. Confederate Monster is interesting in that I think Dave Swartz did a lot of research to try to get details right. I just feel some of the background details, like the little small things that he does, like I can appreciate, but it's more of the bigger picture suspension of disbelief that I have a hard time dealing with in here. So again, so for Virginia, 1864, that is ostensibly the setting of this story. And the problem with that is in 1864, the Confederacy was really on its last legs. Especially considering that this looks like this is probably spring or summer, right, of 1864, which is when Grant was basically meat grinding people and really meat grinding General Lee's army. Not to throw a bunch of history, but basically the Confederacy was on their last legs in 1864. And when you look at this comic, it looks like the Confederacy is doing all right. Everyone's looking good. This guy's got a successful business, and they got enough time to dress up and everything. And they also have enough time to go to fancy parties and dress up like masquerades and whatnot. And it's really weird. Everyone's got ice and booze and cigars and stuff. And if you kind of go over the history of the Civil War, the South was blockaded. So they absolutely could not get, especially by 1864, after 3 years of blockade, they couldn't get basic stuff by this time in the war. And they were basically starting to starve in their own cities. That's what kind of led to them surrendering, pretty much. That and, you know, Lee surrendering and General Sherman basically burning down half the country. But yeah, this book kind of makes it seem like, oh yeah, the South was just dandy. And I feel like what probably would have saved him a lot more was saying like 1861 or 1862, you know, to be honest. But unfortunately, this story requires that the South be desperate for a later plot line that I'll talk about later. But anyway, the other thing that kind of bugs me when I go into these early issues, right, is there's kind of this scene here where Dr. Schmidt is not happy helping Confederate soldiers out because they're racist, etc., lynched black kids, all this other stuff, which, you know, is basically true. Most of the people of this time were racist by modern standards. But I find the dialogue here basically immediately takes me out of the story. Just immediately. Because all of this dialogue sounds like modern writing dialogue. And it's not of the time. So immediately I really don't feel like I'm in the Civil War or the Confederate. It's like, it's nothing compared to, like, say, the French bande dessinées or European bande dessinées that tackle the American Civil War. There's a very loose allegiance to try to get the setting and the feel and the theme of this book right. And then the rest of it kind of feels like Dave just kind of wanted to do a Frankenstein story with a Civil War background and whatnot, right? So very early on, I'm taken out of this story. So then Dave's wife gets kidnapped by these weird dudes with sort of skull masks. And then eventually, you know, they cut off or do a Godfather scene and you know, tell him to go show up here. He goes to some underground development, and it turns out it's like some, you know, Confederate underground resistance or something like that, right? And this is where I really have the most problem with it. So his background, it's discovered that he was basically an apprentice to Victor Frankenstein. So this book is basically, you know, a sort of alt Frankenstein story set within the Civil War. And ends up basically this general here, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who is an actual real life Civil War general. Also a total bastard, but also kind of a brilliant bastard. If you sort of read the Civil War, he was a very, very good general, but also a bastard. Just not a very good person in general, right? But nevertheless, brilliant general. So he basically murders his wife and freezes her in a bunch of ice cubes right here. And he says the only way you can get your wife back is to put her together and basically bring her back from the dead, Frankenstein style. And this issue right here is basically where it completely falls apart. Because this character, Daniel Schmidt, then proceeds to help the Confederates build a super laboratory, work day and night, you know, experimenting with rats and all this other stuff, to save his wife, who is already dead, right? And it's one of those things where, like, it really, like, I find it so unbelievable and so ridiculous. And then even, like, them capturing Frankenstein, which is later on in this issue right here, and then Frankenstein having a coded message to help them, and then here you can see his wife chopped up into pieces, eventually getting his wife revived, and, you know, I'll get to the ending right here later, but basically the entire premise to me doesn't work, because you're saying, okay, so he loves his wife, he doesn't like Confederate soldiers and the Confederacy because he thinks it's racist, white supremacist, whatever, okay? So then his wife gets kidnapped, then he gets led to this, you know, Confederate MI6 CIA bullshit. And then he finds that Nathan Bedford Forrest has murdered his wife, chopped her up in a bunch of pieces, and frozen her. The only way he can get his wife back is by reviving her and working with the... Whoa. This like, straight up, this plot does not work at all. First off, he doesn't even like the Confederacy. So he might as well just, here's a better solution. Move on, go help the Union, and go freaking destroy them, you know, or just refuse to do it, or just in general, right? it is such a leap of human motivation for this character to go that far, which then feeds into these two issues right here, that like the moment that happened, you know, and the whole thing started, and then I jump into issue 2, I'm just totally knocked out of the story and completely disinterested. And it also doesn't help, and here's where, like, so very interesting, issue number 1 is 36 pages, and then issue 2 and 3 are both 20 pages, which means that it's basically 76 pages total, right? Which makes me wonder why Dave Swartz didn't just go with printing it in one floppy, or one big floppy, or just one perfect bound book, right? And the reason why he didn't do that is because when you make it to the end of issue 3, this is the real damnation of this whole series. Bum, 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 to be continued. So it is not a complete story at all. So he, 76 pages right here, an IndieGoGo campaign that is not completed, right? So something to think about for those of you guys out there that are looking for something that you can pick up and read open shut. This isn't one of them. If this premise or this plot or this art is your thing, then I think you would be better served just waiting for it to all be completed and then collected in a trade paperback or something. I don't recommend getting these issues as floppies because, again, I don't know how long it's going to take Dave Swartz to finish this story. It could be 6 issues, it could be 12 issues. I don't know. Like he kind of moves at a decent pace in this, so maybe he finishes it in another 3 issues or whatever. But just to me personally, the idea of a Frankenstein monster story in the Civil War or the Confederacy is actually an interesting concept. I think the execution here is really, like, probably an editor needed to go in there and poke some holes, like in the early plotting stages, and be like, wait, what? Because it does not work. Especially, it doesn't work for me. I'll say that. Maybe for those of you who are more buffs of this kind of thing and just want to just nerd out and can suspend disbelief a lot, then this story might be for you. But yeah, it doesn't work. It just really doesn't work. Oof. Anyway, so yeah, my personal review, not a recommend, but nevertheless, great effort by Dave Swartz. Art is pretty darn good. It's definitely, I can see he's made like major improvements from the Einstein-Tesla book that he did a while back. Overall print quality looks excellent. Kind of interesting that the cover stock is the same as the interior stock, which is a little weird. Normally I don't see that, but he went that route with their color printing. Looks to be good. Saddle stitching looks to be good. Would be better if it was a perfect bound book, but yeah, there you go. Anyhow, guys, that's a review. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Confederate Monster, leave it down below, and I will see you next time.